Welcome to the Impact Sales Tribe VIP call. I'm your host, Joe Beck. And today we're going to talk about something that, it's one of those things that people talk about a lot, but deliver on infrequently. And, this is another one of these things that we talk about and highlight a little bit in Impact Sales Mastery, but we're going to peel back some additional layers on it today. And we're going to talk about multiple ways of power positioning inside what it is that you're doing in your sales process. And, I think for everybody, they might have a different idea of what positioning is and how it's done. And I kind of drill things down into two categories, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But one of the things that people fail to recognize sometimes as it relates to professional selling, and it really doesn't matter what industry you're in, what your background is, what the product or service or solution is. Sometimes people fail to recognize not only that, and we talk about this often, not only that it isn't about them and it isn't about even their solution, it's all about what that person receives and what they get, and more importantly, what they feel they get from what it is that you do. But people misunderstand the power of positioning. You can do so much in the furtherance of your success by understanding positioning. In fact, positioning can be defined in a unique way in the sales process, in that sometimes positioning is more important than salesmanship. Yes, I said it for all the sales trainers that are out there, other sales coaches. Positioning can sometimes be more important than salesmanship. And I'll tell you this because I know after thousands and thousands of sales interactions that I wasn't always on my A game in every interaction, right? I'll admit it. I'll own it. Absolutely. There were times when I was at best maybe a C at what I was doing at that time or in that particular day. Maybe there were days I was on my A game, but there were a lot of times where I wasn't. But I was still wildly successful. Now, why is that? Well, you could chalk it up to a lot of different things. You could chalk it up to, the massive need or the desire of the prospect, which certainly is one of the reasons, one of the contributing factors. But a lot of it had to do with positioning. It had to do with, all these other things kind of lining up. You guys hear the phrase, the sun, the moon, and the stars all lined up, right? Well, positioning is kind of like that. The sun, the moon, and the stars all line up. And they line up and give your prospect complete clarity as to what they need to do, why they need to do it, and most importantly, why they need to do it with you. And you can be a subpar or average salesperson. You could have, for lack of a better way of putting it, challenged communication skills. But if you are a master positioner, if you position things masterfully in how you communicate and how you interact with the people that you're working with, you'll find that your success will still be there. And that's why I say that sometimes positioning is more powerful than salesmanship, because I believe if you position things the right way, sometimes business happens. Things just happen. Like, I remember in my corporate days, there were times when I would work with teams in various offices and different things. And I did a whole training segment on do this, this, and this, and get out of the way. Get out of the way, meaning don't make it more complicated than what it is. Don't push when you don't need to push. Just position, do this, and get out of the way. And what I was really expressing to them was the positioning was so strong, the process was so strong. If you did those things, your success rate was going to be naturally higher than trying to get in there and freewheeling whatever it is you were doing sales-wise. And I still believe that to this day. I believe that people that are wildly successful in selling are masters at positioning, and they position different things. And today we're going to talk about what that positioning looks like, how you utilize it, and just reinforce a little bit more before we open it up for questions, why it's so powerful. So, if you really want to have massive success in selling, if you really want to crush your sales goals, and it doesn't matter what you're selling, what the ticket price is, anything, you need to get good at positioning. Now, let's break this down. There are really two main positioning points that you need to worry yourself about. Now, some people may disagree with this, but I believe these two categories cover the majority of the situations and the majority of the needs that that you're going to really have for positioning. And I believe also that they are some of the most powerful. Now, before we get into that, let me highlight some things that make what I'm going to say today even more powerful. There's positioning during the interaction, and there's positioning pre-interaction, right? So, but today, just so I'm clear, we're talking about positioning during your interaction with your prospects. We're not talking about positioning that may have happened prior to or previous to your conversation. And some of those are powerful as well. And, you know, that's kind of the sun, in the sun, the moon, and the stars. And I'll just give you a quick taste of what I mean when I say that. When you talk about positioning, you know, how you're introduced to somebody makes a major difference, right? And you all know this. If you connect with somebody on social media, on LinkedIn or whatever, and it's a cold interaction, you're just starting to get to know them, that's, you know, certainly a way of doing it, but it perhaps isn't the most powerful. But if you're introduced to somebody via a warm introduction or referral from somebody that they know, like, and trust, it's a powerful introduction. You're positioned in a much more favorable light. And, you know, those are the types of positioning things that I refer to when I say pre-engagement. It's maybe a referral, maybe an introduction, some other way that you're positioned before you actually interact. And that encompasses a lot of other things. That encompasses marketing, that encompasses content, that encompasses branding. We're not talking about that. I just want to make sure we're clear. Those are all things that happen pre the engagement. We're talking about what happens during the engagement. So let's dive right in and talk about what we're referring to. So there are two positioning points that you really focus on during the engagement that can help you create massive success. And these are things that the average person misses. The average person may skip over, dance around, or avoid. And they are things that make all the difference in the world for a top achiever. Like, they understand, like I've got to make sure this gets done. I got to make sure this happens. I've got to make sure that happens. And they know if they do these two things, their success rate is going to be much, much higher than the average person out there. So the first one, and this is one that's very easy to understand, and it's pretty straightforward, and it aligns with what we've talked about for quite a while in Impact Sales Mastery. You know, for many, many years, and thousands of people, I've shared this methodology with them, and it hasn't changed from day one. Okay. Personal positioning, how you position yourself, is the glue behind everything that you do. You all know this. People do business with those that they know, like, and trust. So the stronger you position yourself personally, the more successful you're going to be and the greater your results will be. Now, when I say personal positioning, what am I referring to? And this is what we focus on. That's where the focus is truly on establishing yourself as their trusted advisor. And here's the important part. This is the important part. It's how you do it that makes the difference. Okay. It's not how great you are. It's not how much advertising you do, how much marketing you do. That creates awareness, that creates visibility, that might create some degree of them knowing you and maybe liking you a little bit, but it doesn't create trust. It might give you a little bit of trust if there's some social media incorporated in that and some social proof from other people that have worked with you. That might give you a little bit of trust. But what I'm talking about on this slide, being their trusted advisor, that only comes one way. That comes when you engage people toe to toe, face to face, eye to eye, however you define it. When you engage them by asking insightful, thought-provoking, impact-driven questions. This is one of the major elements and a key figure in sales success in Impact Sales Mastery. And this is what trusted advisors everywhere understand about attaining that status. You have to dig deeper. You have to figure out how you create a bond, a relationship with them. And it happens by asking insightful, thought-provoking, impact-driven questions. And the element that is so critical to this that people miss all the time It's not how great you are. It's not what you know. It's not about your pedigree. And we talk about this a lot as well. It's not about you at all. It's not about you. It's not about your product, not about your solution. None of that matters to them. And the sooner you acknowledge that and accept that, the better off you are. What matters to them is that they feel that they know, like, and trust you. What matters to them is that they feel that what you offer is coming from a place of sincerity and that you truly are trying to solve something for them or deliver something to them that they really need. And that's really pivoted and triggered from sincerity. That comes from you being genuine, you having a servant heart, looking at that interaction as, I want to help you accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish. Here's where the majority of people fail. Here's where a lot of people kind of split off. Imagine like a fork in the road, and a whole bunch of people go to the left, and the people that go on the right path, they kind of follow what we're talking about here. A lot of people think that this is the point when they start product dumping. It's like, let me show you how great I am. Let me show you how great my product is, or what it does, or this or that. Again, it's all focused on them. It's not focused on the needs or the desires or the wants of their prospect. And as a result, they're stacking the deck against themselves. They're making the likelihood of their success being there much, much lower. But the people that get this understand that they develop that relationship, that bond, that trust by asking insightful, thought-provoking questions that really are driven on impact. It's not just how much money you save them. It's what that money can do for them, what their life looks like with it. It's not that their job changing, just getting the new job is the key. It's what does their life look like with that job? Is their spouse or significant other happier with them in that job? Do they get more time for their family, their friends? Do they get to travel more? It's all of the other things that make the impact. And when I use that crossroads analogy, everybody going to the left, it's because they don't want to dig that deep. They don't want to develop that connection. Now, that's the first positioning step. And the reason it's first is because you really haven't earned the right to talk about solution, to talk about positioning anything else until you've done this. Now, this doesn't have to be a complicated process. I've had this process take a long time. I've had this process take just minutes. I remember a call that I went on back when I was living in Pennsylvania. I was working with a consulting company. We did high-level consulting for businesses, some turnaround consulting, the type of work that you step into a lot of problems, a lot of situations. And I sat down with the owner, one of the owners of this small company. I won't mention the company name. They're still in business. They're actually thriving. And I sat down, and within 5 minutes of talking to this gentleman, the one owner, about what was going on inside of his business and asking him what he was trying to accomplish, whatever, not only did he start sharing, and when I mean sharing, I mean bearing his soul, sharing, opening things up. The man was in tears. And he was in tears because there were some things going on inside of his business with his partner, who happened to be a family member, that were just tearing this man apart. I mean, tearing him apart. And through the process of just having this conversation with him, he opened up. Now, I know it could have been time. This could have been a lot of things. He was at that last thread of holding it together, and I happened to be there at that moment. But I know it happened because I was asking him very thought-provoking questions about his business, and the impact was clear. Now, the whole interaction was maybe 20 minutes, but within the first 5, he was already emotional. He was already breaking down. He was already opening these things up. And before we ever talked about anything else, before we went into anything else, we went through this process of me earning his trust by asking him these questions. And it wasn't like I sat there and said, "Hey, do you trust me now?" No, of course not. It was me asking him these things, acknowledging it, kind of feeling it with him, and saying, I appreciate you sharing this. This means so much. I understand how hard this must be. And I was earning his trust by being there with him, being in that moment and going through those things. The reason why most people fail is because they aren't willing to listen. They aren't willing to really understand what's going on with their prospect. They are so laser focused on what they get and what they need and what they want that they don't think about the other person. Now, that is the first part, establishing that trusted advisor status. And whether it takes a couple of minutes or whether it takes hours or days or weeks, you have to go through that journey with your prospects to really, really achieve massive success and to position things in the most favorable light. But there's a second positioning, and that's what I call impact positioning. Now, we talk about impact-driven questions, but impact positioning is different. Impact positioning is beyond just asking the questions and acknowledging the answers. Impact positioning is the next level of how people bring their prospect to the point that they're ready to do business with them. And you know, we talk a lot about this in ISM, in Impact Sales Mastery. We talk a lot about impact-driven questions in this. But you know what's funny? And I know for those that are here live or those that are going to listen to this recording that have been through ISM, you know this little secret already. We don't talk a lot about your offering. In fact, ironically, it's probably the one thing that we talk about least in Impact Sales Mastery. We don't get into your offering. It's not about your offering. What we talk about is impact. What we talk about is what your offering may do for that prospect, that client, right? But impact positioning is how you bridge the gap, from where they are expressing what it is that they need or want or desire and what it means to them. Like, you've done this masterful job of asking them impact-driven questions, and they're sharing with you. And I'll go back to this analogy of this gentleman in this business. He's emotional. He's sharing with me what he wants, what he needs, and what he wants things to look like. You know, at the end of the day, when the dust settles, what does he want his world to look like? Those are the things he's sharing. That's where that trusted relationship was created. And, you know, fast forwarding to the end of that relationship, that business worked with us. That business fixed a lot of the problems. The relationships were repaired. The business continues to thrive. And it happened simply because somebody was willing to open up and somebody was willing to listen and solve the problems. Now, impact positioning is different, because nowhere in any or there did I talk about our product, our solution, our offering up until that point, right? It hadn't happened. It was all about what they were looking for. But what is impact positioning? Well, impact positioning is where you focus on positioning your solution as their logical next step. Now, as with most things, it's not what you do that matters. It's how you do it that makes the difference. So you're going to focus on your solution, positioning it, not by talking about your product, not by, product dumping and pitching to them because you feel they're at a weak point and that, man, now's the opportunity. I can sell this to this guy because this guy really, really needs it, wants it, or has to have it, right? It's not about that. It's about positioning it the right way, doing it the right way. And how that is done is by asking reinforcing questions after they share what they want or need. Now, let me give you an example of a reinforcing question and how powerful this is. And I'm going to go back to this example of this business. So after this gentleman shared everything that was going on inside of his business, after he was worried about this, and this was not a small issue. This was not a minor little thing. This was an issue where the business was struggling. This person believed that their family member, for lack of a better way of putting it, was embezzling money out of the company, and that the company was floundering because this person who they obviously trusted had betrayed that trust and was siphoning money out of the company. Now, fast forward to the end, that wasn't the case, but this gentleman thought it was. Emotionally, he was in that place that's what he thought was happening, and it was tearing him up because, his business is at risk. His family relationships are at risk. His whole world was at risk. So reinforcing questions are not selling to that person at that moment when they're emotional, when they're upset. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with asking questions immediately after what they share in regards to what they want or need. So in this example, this gentleman had said, Joe, what I want and need most at this point, number one is I need to know. I need to know for sure that this isn't happening. That's the first thing I need. And then the second thing I need to do is, if that isn't the problem, I need to figure out what the problem is. Like, why is this money not where it needs to be? Why is the company struggling? Like, I need to know for sure that it isn't, my relative, and I need to know for sure what it is so we can fix it. Those were the things he wanted and needed most. Now, the positioning that I did, the impact positioning I did with him, really came in the form of reinforcing questions on the tail end of what he shared. And they sounded like this. Bob, I understand completely what you're saying. And if I'm hearing you correctly, what's most important to you is, number one, that we get some clarity as to what is really happening with the money, and is your family member involved with this or not involved with this? That's at the top of your list. Am I correct? And he said yes. So that was the first reinforcing question. The second reinforcing question was, and then if I also understand correctly, the next thing you want to focus on is you want to make sure that whatever is impacting the cash flow and the receivables of the business, that we figure that out so we can fix the business, so we can fix the problems. Is that important to you as well? Absolutely, Joe. That's completely what I want to focus on. So in looking down the list, the number one priority is get some clarity about the situation with your family member. The second is figure out what's going on with the receivables, fix this so we can get the business back on track. And the final thing, and this was the piece that I haven't shared yet, the third piece of it was just giving Bob some peace of mind. And I said, so Bob, let me ask you this. If we were able to get you clarity on number one and fix number two, you just said, and correct me if I'm wrong, you just said that those were the things that keep you up at night. Those were the nightmare scenarios that you worried about most. Those are the things that are impacting the rest of your life. If those first two things that you mentioned turned out to be addressed, and let's say we could fix them for you and solve those answers, how would you feel about that? Would that help you sleep better at night? And of course, his answer was, completely, Joe. That would, I can't even tell you how badly I want that to happen. Now, nowhere in that interaction, nowhere in what I just shared, nowhere in what I've talked about did I mention my product, my solution, my cost, my deliverables, nothing. It wasn't a part of the conversation yet. Now, what is part of the conversation at this exact stage is a reinforcement of what he said was important, an acknowledgement that we were hearing him, which underlines the fact that we are his trusted advisor because we heard him loud and clear. We get the priorities. Going through what are the logical next steps, and they're logical next steps. Why? Because this guy just said, this is what I want to deal with. Number one, this. Number two, this. And at the end of it, I'd love to have better peace of mind. That was it. That's what he wanted his life to look like. It had nothing to do with our product or solution. Now, after you ask those reinforcing questions, the very easiest way of taking that next step is to just ask them if you would be able to solve that problem for them. Would you give me the opportunity to help you fix those things? Would you let me help you address that need? Now, the reason why that's so powerful to ask there is, long before any talk about product, solution, cost, anything, I want to get their initial buy-in. I want to get their agreement that, yeah, from everything we talked about so far, yeah, I definitely want you to address these things. If you can make number one go away, number two go away, and I can sleep better at night, absolutely, I want you to do it. And that simple reinforcement of those questions at the right time puts you in this amazingly powerful position of being their next logical step towards the accomplishment of those things. You've earned their right as a trusted advisor. You've gone on this little emotional journey with them, talking about what's important, what they need, what their desires are, good or bad, right? And then all of a sudden you're reinforcing that with, so I understand this is what's most important. Yes. And I understand this is important to you. Yes. And would this help you sleep better at night? Yes. You're just taking them along for that ride. And then at the tail end of it is, would you let me help you with this? Would you let me help you accomplish that? Would you let me help you sleep better at night? Whatever it is and however you phrase it. It really doesn't matter about your salesmanship if you position things that powerfully. Your salesmanship could be D- if your positioning is A+. And the reason why that's so important, and I want to just kind of reinforce this on this graph, we talk a lot about this impact triangle, right? And when it comes to positioning, when it comes to the reinforcement of when people make decisions, we talk about this accelerated inverted pyramid where at the lower levels, people are neutral. At the higher levels, they start seeing value and they start to really get engaged. Well, guess what? This whole conversation, in this example I've used with Bob, this whole conversation was emotional. It was emotional from 5 minutes in. We were hanging out above the impact line where the arrows are on this slide. We were already in the impact stage. The only missing piece is how Bob gets there. How does he get it done? And that's where we became his logical next step. That's where we became, how can you do that? Like, think of it this way. You say to him, would you like us to help you solve number 1 and 2 and help you sleep better at night? What do you think Bob's answer was? Absolutely. I'd love it if you could. How do we do it? How do we do it? Not, oh my gosh, I don't want to hear about what you're doing. It was, how do we do it? And why was it, how do we do it? Because of this slide, because Bob was in the impact zone. Bob was emotional. Bob was focused on what was impacting him the most, what his biggest concerns, needs, or challenges were. And there we were as the logical next step, having earned the right as his trusted advisor because we've asked the questions, we got him there. And it became easy for us to say, here's what we do. Here's the cost for what we do. And at the end of all of this, you would have known the answer to number 1, you would have solved number 2, and you would absolutely sleep better at night. And the power behind that, the power behind handling it that way is all on this slide. That interaction was kept in the impact phase. We talked about value. In fact, even when we started talking about the product, what we did, because, I worked for a business analysis firm. This consulting firm did business analysis. And basically I said to them, we're going to do a forensic overview of your entire business. We're going to figure out quickly what the problem is. There's no doubt we're going to figure out number 1, and we're going to figure out number 2. It's a slam dunk. We're going to figure out the answers. And I said, you may not like the answer, but we will get you the answer. And at the end of all of this, even if the answers are not what you want to hear, or they make you upset, you will at least have clarity. You will at least know where you are, and you'll know what the next steps need to be. And at the end of all of this, you're going to sleep better at night. And Bob was in complete agreement. And this analogy, Bob was like, you know what, Joe? To me, that's worth more than anything else. And the funny thing was, and this was not a small sale. This was, I believe it was a 5-figure contract. It wasn't a small sale, but you know what happened at the end of this? After we signed all the agreements, and after we did everything that we said we were going to do, I still remember the conversation I had with Bob after the end of all of this. And his answer was, Joe, I would have paid 5 times the cost of what you guys charged me to get those things resolved, because I was at my breaking point. Do you think cost has anything to do with things when people are at the right place and you're their logical next step? It only plays a role if there's the complete absence of the capability of paying for what you do. That's the only way. And the fact is, you probably wouldn't be there with them because you would have qualified them beyond that point to get to that stage anyway. But that's the only time when cost really plays a role, because they're not talking about a like for like exchange. They're not in the value zone. They're in the impact zone. They're making a decision based upon emotional factors and things that mean the most to them. And when you deliver a solution that addresses those things, or gives them what they're looking for, or solves their biggest problem, or addresses their biggest need, and emotionally satisfies them, cost is a byproduct. It's not really what they're looking at. What they're looking at is impact. What they're thinking about is impact. What they're hoping for and desperately hoping happens as a result of working with you is impact. And if you tie your pricing to impact, you will very rarely have price issues with people. You will very rarely have the objection of that. And if you do, it's probably because, quite honestly, that there was a gap somewhere in the process. But most of the time, when you position things the right way, pricing becomes secondary, because what they want most is to address the things that they shared with you. And the reason why that is so powerful as far as positioning, and why you don't talk about your product, your solution, your offer, or your price up until you get them to that point. Do you remember what I said about what I would share with my teams about get out of the way? Well, sometimes that involves your product, your service, your offering, and your price. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. Don't get in the way of them developing a relationship with you, them, looking at you as their trusted advisor, and you positioning, you're helping them based upon what they need. See, the problem is with a lot of people is they throw their product, their solution, their offer, their price in the middle of that conversation somewhere. And the only thing that person then focuses on is not the impact. They focus on the price. They focus on, oh, well, I've got to do this or that term, that condition, that price. That's what they're thinking about. They're not thinking about what you do anymore. They're not thinking about the impact it has. And you're fighting an uphill battle to get them refocused. So why do you go there first? Why do you go to impact first? Why do you follow the positioning that I just described here today first? It's because when you do that, they are much, much more likely to convert. I don't know what the exact ratios are, but they are much more likely to convert because they're in the right frame of mind. They aren't negative. They aren't looking at it as an obstacle. They're looking at it as an opportunity. They're open-minded. They're focusing on you as a solution and not as somebody who's going to cost them something. And that plays such a role in people's success. And, I think one of the most important things that people can learn to do better is positioning in their interactions. When you become a master of positioning, you will find yourself in a much different state of mind yourself, because you know what happens as a result of this? Not only does your business seem to run easier, do you feel that the process of winning new business is easier? Because it is. You start to feel better about what you do. You start to feel less resistance. People start to be more appreciative of the work that you do, and it shows. And the byproduct of all that, and this is something that's important as well, and you can't put a price tag on this, is you feel better about it. You feel better about the work that you do. Because let's face it, you do good work. You impact people's lives, but nothing makes you feel like that better than when somebody else tells you or says to you, this has changed my life, or this has helped me so much, or I'm so appreciative of you, or I can't tell you how much I appreciate everything you've done for me. That's what makes you feel better. It's not about you knowing it. It's about them knowing it and acknowledging it. And the sooner you accept that, and the sooner you play in the impact zone and focus on positioning powerfully with people, the more you're going to see success. The less you spend out, the less you spend in the impact zone, the more you spend time talking about value and, what this cost is and that cost is. I'm telling you, it's harder to get there. So that was what I wanted to cover today. I want to open some things up to some questions that can be about this, that can be about any other topic sales related. Who's got a question for me? I'm happy to help.
Hey, Joe, would you say that, finding that impact zone is accomplished more by, I guess, listening more to the client versus assuming and talking, which we as salespeople tend to do?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. I mean, your listening skills have to be good. You're right. You have to listen more, talk less, and pay close attention. You're absolutely right. And you're right in saying that as salespeople, it doesn't matter what people sell. There's a lot of people that they talk themselves out of transactions because they're talking and their prospects aren't. And then they act surprised. Like, I don't understand why this guy didn't buy or this deal didn't happen. And, if you could go back and play a perfect recording of what happened, you'd find that they were talking and they weren't listening. So you are 100% right in both assessments. Okay. Are there other questions? Anything else about what we talked about today that I can answer? Because positioning is one of those things that you've got to work at. You've got to practice it. It's like anything else. You've got to perfect your craft.
Hi, Susie.
Hey, Susie.
I just realized that I am not, as a result of this presentation, I'm not going as far as I should with some things. What I mean by that is, one of the things that helps me with my clients is to be able to explain on their documents what would be better, what would be improved. But I realized from this presentation that while I'm telling them this is how we would improve it, and this is how it's going to change, and this is how it's going to help you, which I always add in how it's going to help you, how it's going to reduce time for you, and how it's going to make the job search faster and get you a better position. But I realized, like with a client that I was talking with, a prospect that I was talking with yesterday, that what was important to him and listening to him, what was important to him was like, he was finding out that his peers, his colleagues are landing the same jobs that he has now, but with more money than he ever expected to make. So I realized that one of the things I have to do is add on that not only is this going to help you with the job search, but it's going to get a leg up on your peers. I think I missed that part of the impact conversation. So I know that I need to get a little bit more specific, because he had given me a lot of information about what he's looking for and what his goals are and what makes him tick. So I realized that I have to go further than the generic, this is going to help you with your job search and this is going to help you with this. I have to go further and say, because it will also help you beat out the competition. It will help you get even more money than your colleagues, to be more specific to his desires. So,
yeah. I think you're right, Susie. I think the other thing that you have to realize, sometimes how you phrase something makes all the difference to the person hearing it. And, I think in a situation like that, especially if you rephrase it just a little bit, their perception of it could be entirely different, and in a good way. And, you could rephrase something to highlight something and say, and I'm sure that would be important to you, correct? And it's reinforcement. You're telling them, but you're actually gaining their reinforcement and acknowledgement of it, which is less than telling them. And it feels more cooperative. Like it seems like they're collaborating with you on it versus you telling them you need to do this because it's the best thing.
Okay, wait, this brings an important point for me. So you're saying that it's important to ask the question and not make the statement.
Yeah, why not? Like,
okay.
I think sometimes, yes, people hire people for their expertise. But the one thing that I think is really important to understand, and this is one of these, it's a perception that people have, and certainly always something in your field, especially, they look at themselves as the expert of their field, and they know that you're not an expert in their field, you're an expert in yours. Well, when you're working on something relative to their field, it only makes sense to acknowledge their expertise and bring them along in the conversation. And it's psychological. It basically acknowledges that they're good at what they do, or else they wouldn't be where they are. And you're acknowledging that expertise, and you're working together with them to marry your expertise to theirs, versus saying, here's what you need to do. Here's why. Yes, they expect you to do some of that, but at the same time, if you do that in a way that makes them feel that they're alongside you for the journey versus you just telling them what to do, it will always give you a better result.
So if I ask them a question, like I make a statement, can I do it in the form of, if I make a statement, this will help you with X, this will help, you get to that goal. Does that make sense? Is that enough?
Yeah. Or you could open it up with something like, so if I understand you correctly, you had said this was important to you based upon where you are at this stage of your career. And they say, yes. Then you add in what you were just going to say.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And see what you brought them into the decision, even though
Yes.
they aren't making it.
Right.
Like but you're basically what you're doing is you're acknowledging their credibility, and then you're basically saying, here's what we're going to do and why, but you're acknowledging their credibility as a factor, and it makes them feel like they're part of it. It's just it's a way to make the process seem more collaborative, and more importantly, it's less likely for them to object to it later. Like, one of the challenges that people face in sales interactions, and you guys know this, and anybody watching the recording knows this, but when you're directive, when you're one way, it's only a matter of time before somebody puts their hand up and says, no, I disagree, or no, I'm not ready, or no, that's too much, or no. But the more they're involved in the interaction to get to that end, and the more they're acknowledging and saying yes, and doing this and saying yes, and being a part of it and saying yes, and taking the next step, the less likely they are to object at the end. The less likely they are to say, no, this doesn't work for me. Well, what do you mean it doesn't work for you? We just went through all this together. Like, it's really hard for them to do that psychologically because they're a part of that process all the way through.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And it's an expanded psychological version of the old methodology of only asking questions that people would say yes to. Because when you're interacting with somebody and you're working towards some type of a sales decision, the words that you don't want them to say ever are no, right? So you ask questions that they would say yes to as much as possible. The more you do that, the more likely you're going to have a successful result. That's at least always been the prevailing methodologies. Now, the fact is, it's deeper than just that. That's, on the surface. But the more they're a part of that process, Susie, the more likely you are to get a successful outcome, because they're going to feel that the whole process was collaborative, and you help them on this journey. And I want you to remember this phrase: it's guided discovery. Like, they want you for your expertise. They need you for your expertise. You're their guide, but you're not doing it yourself. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, do we have any other questions that I can answer for today's VIP? Okay, well, if we have no other questions, I'm going to wrap things up. I was excited to be back this week. I missed last week. We were doing some traveling, but we're back, and we will be back here again, same time next week. We've got some great topics coming up, and I'm certainly open to adding new things into the agenda. So in the spirit of collaboration, as I just talked about, feel free to send me anything. If you're part of our VIP, let me know what you'd like me to cover, how you'd like me to review some things, and I'm happy to include them in the schedule. So I want to thank you all for being here, for those that are live and for those that are here to catch the recording. And if we can help you in any way, just reach out. You guys have a great day. We'll talk soon. Take care.